the overall economy, we're spending so much money. Our budget is, we take in a $2.5 trillion a year in income in the United States, but we spend $3.5 trillion.
Yeah.
So we have this unbelievable deficit, and it's hard to imagine that would ever, how to ever get that under control or get back. Nobody has a political confidence to lower costs, for Social Security or things like that. If you told some 25-year-old person today, hey, you're not going to be able to get Social Security until you're 75. Right now, you can get it, even if you're 25 today, you can get it when you're 62. Yeah. They're all going to live so much longer. But nobody will change that. Yeah. So nobody has the confidence or power or strength to change spending.
Mr. Fraker, thanks for joining me again, bud.
Thank you, Conrad. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, thanks for coming on again. We had a little technical difficulties on the first one, so I appreciate you taking the time to come on back and re-record. That
was my best work last time.
I know.
But I'll try to do better this time.
It's unbelievable. I don't know if that's possible, but it certainly could be. Well, last time we saw each other, you were getting inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Lifetime Achievement Award. Pretty incredible honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, at Lifetime, it's almost some of those candidates it's posthumous. I could have been posthumous, so this is okay. At least I'm still going.
Amen to that. Well, that was quite awesome to see you receive that, and I know you're extremely modest, but it was certainly a well-deserved award, bud.
Thank you.
Before we dive into all things commercial real estate, I love to learn kind of a little bit about Jack and how that kind of shaped you. You, if memory serves me correctly, born out in San Angelo, moved to Shreveport, right?
Yes.
And then gravitated here to Dallas.
Yes.
And you graduated Hillcrest High School, right?
W.T. White.
W.T. White. Pretty close.
Yes.
Pretty close. Tell me about your childhood. Who was some of the most impactful people kind of on you growing up? If you go back and look at it.
Yes. Well, I had a great childhood growing up in Shreveport.
Yeah.
And we moved here in the 5th grade.
Yep.
And we, back then, as I'm with that question, I'm thinking back. We played a lot of sports.
That was one of my follow-up questions. I mean, did you play sports growing up?
Yeah, I did.
A ton.
Yes, a ton. As a little boy, we played baseball whenever we could.
Yeah.
There was no alarm on your cell phone because there was not cell phones. But all these boys in the neighborhood knew that we should meet at the
playground
and play baseball or football. We played a lot of sports. And then we played golf all the time. So I grew up doing that.
I mean, that's where some of this competitive fire has to come from, right? Competing as a kid, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, it was good. And then I got into organized baseball with the YMCA. I think it was. Yeah. And that was good.
Yep.
And then in high school, I didn't really play. I was on the track team.
What was the event for Mr. Fraker back then? What were you?
The 880.
880, yes.
But now we call it 800 meters.
Sure.
But 880.
That is one of the hardest events to run.
It's almost like you're sprinting the whole time.
Yes. And boy, by that second lap, you're about to collapse.
Yes. I like that. And I played baseball one year in high school.
Yeah.
And then I didn't play on the football team.
Why is that?
I think I had injured my knee.
Okay.
I think I had a knee injury. I couldn't play.
And the reason why I asked that is just because, as a kid growing up in Texas during these times, like you play football, right?
Yes.
I mean, like that's
we still did play football as boys.
Yeah.
We were not on the team, but we'd all even high school.
Sure.
And we had really rough games in high school.
Yeah.
But I was not on the team.
Okay. So hated losing, and competed, and then when you were a kid, Jack, did you have any, what were your dreams of what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you have any idea when you were a kid?
You know what? I wish I could come up with a real clever answer, but no, I don't think I really thought about it much. And I went to the University of Texas and got a business degree majoring in finance.
Yep.
So I didn't even think much beyond that. I thought finance back then meant that you might get a job at a bank.
Sure.
And so when I graduated, I got a job in Alaska.
Yep.
On the Alaska pipeline.
I know.
And I told you that before. And because I had a business degree in finance, I was involved in sort of what they called cost accounting.
Yeah.
Which
sounds exciting.
It sounds better than it really was, but it was adding up the cost for all the raw materials, pipelines.
Sure. Well, and you're in Alaska. What an amazing environment. That was
great.
Yeah.
I loved it.
What big town you lived in, or were you out in the middle of the state?
No, it was a construction camp. Yeah. So all along the route of the pipeline from Prudhoe Bay down to Valdez.
Wow.
There was a camp, let's say, every 25 miles.
Interesting.
30 miles.
Yeah.
And we would actually, speaking of sports, it's just now occurring to me, we had each camp had its own softball team.
Okay.
And our team we lived in this construction camp named Glen Allen. We were the Glen Allen Mooses. And I was, I haven't thought about this in years, but I was a coach or captain of our team.
Okay.
And we had grown men on our team. And I was only, 22 years old or something.
Right.
And we played all along the construction area, the south part of the pipeline.
Now, were y'all victorious in that season, or did y'all lose to the Potomac polar bears?
Polar bears. We were okay. We were probably 500 at best.
That's fair.
We played this one team, and they had two guys that were previously had been on the U.S. Olympic hockey team.
Oh boy!
And those guys. Hockey, I'm sure they were great at hockey, but they could hit the base softball
just as
out of sight.
Yeah.
So we didn't win it.
Yeah. What was that? Were y'all allowed to hunt and fish and do that stuff?
No.
No,
there was none of that.
Interesting.
And there was sports, and then there was.
Did you have any grizzly bear stories walking into camp and stuff like that?
Well, actually, if we're talking about that history, I did work in Alaska twice in my life.
Okay.
So that was after college.
Yep.
And then the summer before college, I had a job as a geologist assistant.
Okay.
North of the Brooks Range, north of the Arctic Circle. And way up north. But in the summertime, even north of the Arctic Circle, it could be 100 degrees.
Really?
Yeah. And I was a geologist assistant carrying sediment samples, rock samples for these masters in engineering or master geologists.
Right.
And they were trying to find, future copper mines or future whatever material.
Right.
And they would literally stake claims that those claims would last 40 years. I don't know how long they last now or if all that's changed.
Right.
But there was no infrastructure, no roads, railroads. So if they did find a giant field of copper, they just would take a claim, and hopefully 40 years later they could be able to get it out of there.
Wow!
But but we did see grizzly bears, black bears, wolves, porcupines. Porcupines can climb trees.
I did not know
we saw
that.
one time in a tree.
Interesting.
And we would see these wolves, and they could see us way before we could see them.
Yeah.
And they would howl and send out a warning to other wolves in the area. And I had all that experience.
That's great. Best childhood memory?
Gosh. I always liked Christmas time. Those are good memories.
Yeah, sure.
I had some childhood memories. I went and visited my mother's sister, who was a nun, in St. Louis. And so that was kind of a good childhood memory because I got to go all by myself with my grandparents.
Okay.
And from Dallas, whatever it was, Shreveport to St. Louis, it was a long drive.
Yeah.
So that was as you're asking me these questions.
Yeah, that's great.
I should have asked for these questions in advance. I could have given you better answers. That was a good childhood memory.
Yeah.
We didn't have very many vacations, but we went to Galveston.
Yeah.
That was a childhood memory.
That's before it became the carcinogenic coast. It was probably nice and pristine back in those days.
It was nice. I mean, I remember it was the water was brown.
Yeah.
It wasn't
like, the Caribbean.
Caribbean.
Yeah. If you could tell your 18-year-old self anything, Jack, looking back, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I didn't know all these questions were going to be so deep.
You like these deep questions?
I would have, I guess I would have read more.
Okay.
I would have, I don't know if I would change too many things. Going back.
My big thing is I would tell myself, like, go seek mentorship early in your career. Yes. I think that's probably the biggest thing I've learned is go get in front of those people, that have done it before you, and it'll make your career so much better and easier.
Well, I think I did some of that just organically.
Yeah.
I seemed to gravitate towards certain people.
Yeah.
And would want to be around them.
Right.
And so when you said when I'm looking back to an 18-year-old, I didn't really start thinking about the future until I got out of college.
Yeah.
And after I got finished with those overseas jobs.
Yeah.
But when I started getting real jobs, I did find identified mentors.
Yeah.
Followed their path.
Yeah. Smart.
I could name in the real estate business, I could name about 15 mentors that are still active today.
Yeah.
And I told you, I just talked to one of them.
Yeah.
In the lobby of your building on the cell phone.
You sure did.
And
tell that story. That's a great story.
Well, that's when I got back from those overseas jobs, and I wanted to had a finance degree, and by that time I realized I wasn't going to go work for a bank.
Yeah.
And a lot of my buddies, I'd been gone for about over 3 years after college. A lot of my buddies were getting into this thing called real estate.
Yeah.
And I never even heard of real estate or thought of it back in college.
Yeah.
And I tried to get a job with all the big names you can think of. And somebody said, well, you should go talk to this guy, Jeff Swope.
Yeah.
And he can give you some advice. And I got it. And I called up Jeff Swope, and he said, yeah, okay, I knew you were going to call. I can see you at tomorrow at 6. I said, okay, great. I'll see you tomorrow night at 6.
Right.
And he said, no, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.
6 a.m. Yeah.
And I went to Jeff's office, and I don't know who hears these podcasts, but I went to Jeff's office at 6, and he's sitting there, and I could tell he had already read the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
He had a suit and tie on, and little beads of perspiration on his forehead.
Yeah. So he'd already worked out.
He'd already read the Wall Street Journal. So forever he's been sort of a mentor to me.
Yeah.
People like that in the business. I went to, Mark Myers, I can talk about him.
Sure.
He was at Trammell Crow Company. He was a mentor to me.
Yeah. One of Trammell's first partners, right?
One of his first partners, and he was a national partner for all industrial in the U.S. Incredible. And when you walked an industrial building with him, his stride was so long. He just would cover that building, and then he would point out physical features and attributes of the building that to the untrained eye, which my eyes were untrained, I didn't see what he was seeing. So he was a mentor.
Yeah.
I worked in, when I got in real estate, I'm probably going out of sequence with your questions.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
But I worked for this company that was named Clark and Wood.
Yep.
Tom Clark. And the other partner was Jim Wood. And they were different personalities. Tom Clark was a natural born salesman.
Yep.
Big smile on his face, always glad handing people, and he could open any door.
Yep.
And his partner, Jim Wood, was great personality as well, but he was all about studying the assets. I mean, he really knew how to quantify a deal.
Yeah.
All that part of it. So I put together a pro forma before people even knew what pro formas were.
And you kind of need that to be a successful guy, right? I mean, you got to be a salesman in this business, period, especially on the brokerage side of things. But you also got to understand the numbers.
Yes. So he understood the numbers, and then he made me, Jim Wood, memorize entire industrial parks.
Yeah.
So I would drive my car in Brook.
Which one? Where'd you start?
Brook Hollow.
Brook Hollow. Okay.
Yeah. So I would drive the streets in Brook Hollow, Ambassador Row, all those streets. And then I would come back to the office around 5.
Yeah.
And he would say, okay, I asked you to go drive around Brook Hollow today. What'd you see?
Right.
So, and he said, for example, you took a left off of Regal Row, you turned on to Ambassador Row.
Yep.
What's the first building on your left? I said, well, it's Acme Paint Company or whatever it was. How big is that building? Because I was supposed to have done my homework in advance. I said, well, it's 150,000 square feet. What's the building across the street? That's Standard Paint Company. And how big is that building? And who owns those buildings? Who owns it? So I memorized all those places.
Sure.
And then in those early days, and even today, you do much more active brokerage than I do, but you do cold calling.
Oh, yeah.
And back then, you cold called on the door. You went cold called, walked up there and tried to get in the door.
Yeah.
And that was a new experience for me. And I was okay at it, but I got deflated with constant rejection.
Who were you losing? Who dominated that market when you started down there, Jack?
I could, some of the old names. Gary Lindsay.
Gary Lindsay was
there. Chris Teasdale was there.
Yeah.
There was some other guy. Darrow Hildreth.
Okay.
That name has disappeared, but
is he related to Al Hildreth?
Yeah, Al Hildreth and Terry Darrow.
Yeah.
They were partners.
Okay.
So they had much more business than we had as brokers.
Yeah.
But those guys, Clark and Wood, sent me to the Dale Carnegie course.
Oh.
So there was to help you overcome objections. So whenever, and that course is still relevant today.
Yes, it is.
And I was in Singapore, let's say a couple of years ago, and went into the lobby of this office building had a meeting with somebody there. And on the ground floor of that building was the Dale Carnegie course.
Really?
They occupied the entire ground floor of this office building, which means they're still a viable going concern.
For sure.
Can pay rent in exotic places around the world. But they, if you get some objection where the manager of the business says, I don't want to hear about what you're talking about. I don't want to hear about anything. We're happy here at this building. And you would say, well, if there was a way to get a better building at a lower rent, wouldn't you like to hear about it?
Right.
That's how you would kind of overcome that objection. Sure. So I learned all that stuff early on.
Yeah. So, just like most brokers, you started off knocking on doors, learning a submarket, leasing buildings, selling buildings, doing all that stuff. And then over time, it obviously changed for you. And then you kind of got more into the capital markets or the investment sale world, right?
Yes.
And when did that kind of start for you? About early aughts or late 90s?
Oh, I would say that would have been in the early 90s.
Early 90s,
late around 1990, late 1990.
Started selling buildings.
I mean, at first I was doing leasing, like we just talked about.
Right.
And then I did a lot of land deals.
Okay.
Because I left out one important thing, which is that I worked for Southern Pacific Railroad.
That's how you got in the business.
Yes. Yeah. So they had, because I interviewed with all those guys like Jeff Swope and Mark Myers. And Mark Myers said you had to have an MBA. Jeff Swope, they didn't really have any openings.
Yep.
Interview with Bill Duval and Barney Giles at Lincoln Property Company. They said, you can start tomorrow. And here's our commission structure. I didn't know what a commission was.
Right.
So I failed out. Wasn't successful getting a brokerage job right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then got a job with Southern Pacific Railroad where we sold land sites.
Right.
So I had a lot of my early days was just as much land sales as leasing.
Yeah.
But then we made a lease in Valwood Park.
Yep.
And then the next thing I know, those guys I just mentioned, Darrow and Hildreth, sold 10 buildings in that park to Prudential Insurance Company.
Okay.
And that's when it first dawned on me there's a whole nother side to this business, which is the investments part of it.
Right.
So that would have been in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And I mean, the company Prologis, for example, was founded in 1992.
Right.
So it was before that.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I did both things, leasing and capital markets. And then I switched firms from Cushman & Wakefield to CBRE.
Yep.
And when I joined CBRE, the Cushman & Wakefield people, pushed back a little bit on me leaving. And they said, a lot of these client relationships you have from a leasing perspective, they belong to the firm.
Mm.
So, but it was okay at that timing because I guess that was around the .com bubble burst.
Yep, right. Yeah, right after 9/11.
Recession.
Yep.
And leasing had slowed down anyway, and capital markets was picking up.
Yeah. And what was the first portfolio sale that you remember? Like multi-market or more than just, a handful of buildings?
That would have been in, let's say, that would have been the late 1990s.
Yeah.
And I worked with Todd Platt.
Yeah.
And he's today the CEO of Hillwood.
Right.
And we sold we sold a building in the Metropolitan Business Park in Farmers Branch.
Okay. Yeah.
And
right across the road over here.
Right over here. And the group that came in second place through that process was LaSalle Partners.
Yep.
And so we got a phone call after we chose the winning bidder, and then we got a phone call from LaSalle Partners, and the guy said, we thought he was going to say, I'm really upset with you guys. We didn't win the deal.
Right.
But he said, you know what? I want to compliment you on the way you ran that process. That was great for your client.
Yeah.
You got the best price out of the market, best price and most qualified buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm disappointed we didn't get it, but we want to hire you guys to at least put you on the RFP list for a deal in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
And so we were, so complimented by that. And we put together a really great pitch. We were not capital markets guys at all. And we have had to compete with the best firms of that era.
Yeah.
And Todd and I went up to that pitch and literally rolled our sleeves up to make it look like, okay, we're industrial guys. Let's get down to work. Get to work.
Yeah.
And we had studied the heck out of those buildings in that submarket. And
yep.
Took old-fashioned, pictures and glue sticks and put them in our presentation.
Yeah.
And we had another guy on our team, Graham Gardner, and he graduated, I think, with a master's from Harvard Business School.
Smart guy.
He was smart, and we were smart, but he was really a smart guy. The three of us did that deal, and the winner of that was Reef when we sold it.
Yeah.
And who came in second place was AEW.
Wow.
And almost the same story. The AEW guy said, you did a great job for your client. We actually are going to sell some buildings and put you on the RFP list.
Yeah.
Because we talked about the building from a occupier's perspective.
Yep.
From our leasing backgrounds.
Yeah.
And that distinguished us against, more pure investments people. And then the same thing happened after we sold that deal to Invesco, or I think it was Invesco. TA came in second place, and then TA hired us. So we started getting all these institutional relationships from the sale of that one building over here in Metropolitan Business Park. I may have some of the facts mixed up, but it was something like that.
Yeah. Well, and it obviously you were doing something that everybody else wasn't doing.
Yes.
Maybe to the level of detail and insights and, elevating the investment sales world, and that's
we talked about some of these investors never thought about the truck court dimensions or the column spacing,
right?
Or the
office finish amounts,
skylights, And so we put all of that vernacular in our discussions with institutional investors, and then we rehearsed every route, And back in those days, you'd pick up somebody at DFW Airport, and it'd be nonstop talking. We would talk about the market, even if we'd say, look at that office building over there on the side of LBJ.
Yeah.
Here's who owns that building. Not that it's even relevant to our industrial deal, but we wanted to show that we had some knowledge.
Some market knowledge, yeah, for sure. The old adage, Jack, experts earn more, right? Is
I like
so
that
true.
One.
And
then we in those early days we talked about rental rate growth. Upside.
I love that story because a lot of people might not know this, but Jack and his team were kind of the first guys to go out there and show like a discounted cash flow and rent growth into their packages.
Yes.
Now everybody does that stuff, but you really started that.
Yeah, we kind of started it, and we sold some buildings in Houston one time. And I did not coach the local industrial leasing broker well enough because these investors ask probing questions.
Yeah.
And I think that investor said, hey, I'm looking at this sales package that Jack and Todd and the team did, and it shows the rents are going to go up 3% a year.
Yeah.
And this broker, I couldn't find his leg underneath the table to kick him. But he said, well, the rents, they'll be the same for the next 20 years as they were 20 years ago. Rents never grow
change
in Houston. So that was bad.
Yeah.
And then when that happened again, a couple of years later, we were selling a big park in New Jersey.
Yep.
And this guy, he was with our same company. The guy in Houston was with a different company, but this guy was with our same company. And he goes, I'm not going to lie. I've gotten this far in my career without lying. I said, I'm not asking you to lie. Don't you think that, inflation or other things could change rents over the years?
Right.
I'm just, we're talking about 10 years from now. You think rents could go up?
Yeah.
And, he finally bought into it. And he talked about some rental rate growth. I had a guy in the back seat of the car with me when we're driving the market. And this broker from our New Jersey office literally grabbed his rearview mirror and turned it so that he could see my face, and he winked at me when he said that rents will go up. Like, is that what you wanted me to say, Jack? But sure enough, I mean, if you forgot, those buildings, actually, we've sold some of those buildings again. That was 20 years ago.
Right.
And they're probably 4 times what they were back then.
Yeah, there's definitely been rent growth, and especially in the last 5 years, it's been unbelievable.
Yes.
And just a couple years later, and next thing you know, only $85 billion worth of industrial sales you've handled.
Well, it's a big number, and I asked somebody on the team to help me put together a historical track record because I needed it at Newmark.
Yeah.
It's a big. It all adds up over the years.
And that's just it's
and the per square foot sale prices were $20
That's forever
back then, and now they're $220.
Yeah,
so it's amazing.
No, it truly is. I mean, would you ever imagined when you got in the business the career that you've had?
No, I think I've told you this before in different settings, but that I think I had a fear of failure. Yeah. I didn't want to fail.
Yeah.
And my dad wanted me to be an engineer or geologist because he was in the oil business. He never even knew you could get a business degree.
Right.
And so I think I let him down on that. And I got married and didn't want to fail her or fail the family.
Yeah, sure.
So I think the fear of failure was more of my motivation. So back in those days, I didn't think out in the future what it could be one day. Right. I just wanted to make it happen, survive. Survive.
Well, and you're synonymous with your work ethic is still around today. I mean, I've heard the stories of you and Todd Platt. One of you would get there at 6 a.m. the next day. The other guy's there at 5:45. The next day, you're there at 5:30. I mean, y'all were just a machine.
It was something like that. And you can look around the industry today. I'm gonna go ahead and mention this guy's name, although I haven't thought about it for a long time. His name is Tim Relier.
Yeah.
Tim Relier, and he's the #1 office tenant rep in Houston. Okay. But he did deals all over the United States. He represented Boeing when they moved out of Seattle, for example.
Okay.
And I worked with him a lot when I was at Cushman and Wakefield, and he would love to leave a voicemail on my phone. Hey, it's Tim, it's 5:15. I'm getting in a little bit late today, but let's catch up later. So there's a guy on a whole different side of the business, office tenant rep.
You know who used to do that to me and a bunch of other guys back? Mark Miller. At Robert Lynn. Yes. I mean, Mark was synonymous for like getting in the office between 4 and 5, and you'd stroll in and you'd think you're early at 6 a.m. and your light would be blinking. And you'd listen to it and you're like, yeah, this is Mark. It's about 4:15 and I'm just calling about, your property over there off of McDaniel, and you'd be like, Unbelievable.
Yes. But it pays off.
It does pay off, right?
I have all this conversation, Conrad's making me think of some old anecdotes I haven't thought about.
Yeah.
But when I had that railroad job, part of my job was handling this huge correspondence that they did all across the Southwest.
Yeah.
Besides making land deals in industrial parks in Dallas, the day-to-day would be renewing a farmer's lease on a rail spur in Kansas.
Yeah.
And I have to do all this dictation. So I learned how to do dictation on a micro cassette recorder.
Yeah.
And I could crank out huge volume of correspondence. That's been another thing that I think's helped me over the years.
Yeah.
And I remember there's a really good, nice guy, and I think he's out of the business now, and his office was right next to mine at Cushman in Wakefield. And I'd walk by his office, and just the greatest guy, most personable guy, great salesman. But he'd be handwriting out these long memos on a big yellow pad of paper, the legal size yellow.
Yeah, right.
Writing, and and by the time I walked over to my office, which is one office down, I could have dictated 3 of those kind of letters.
Right.
So I got, besides going to the office early in the morning, there's other productivity tools such as dictation.
Yeah.
And
you still use it today, don't you?
I use it today.
Yeah.
And so I dictated. I don't have a cassette recorders.
Right.
But I do.
You just leave messages.
Leave message with my assistant.
Yeah.
She can transcribe it and type it, send it out later.
A lot faster than writing it out.
Yes.
Smart. So, we're starting to sell big portfolios. What was, let's just talk about some of the bigger deals for. What was the largest deal that you ever sold?
I think we did some deals in the $5 billion range.
Incredible.
And those are, so sometimes I tell some friends that are not in real estate.
Yeah.
And they would do the math in their head because they just sold their house. They'd say, gosh, 6% on $5 billion.
Yeah.
And I was.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. I said, no, it's different. And it's
in the commercial world.
Yeah, really smaller. Yeah. But it's all about volume.
For sure.
I left out one other thing that was important in my career was it came from a tenant rep, which was cold calling on Nokia mobile phones.
Yep.
I've told you that story before.
Yes.
And Nokia mobile phones, this is the early days. They were way behind Motorola, who was number 1 in the world for cell phones.
Yep.
And they wanted to catch up.
Yep.
Nokia did. And they were already having great market share in Europe.
Yep.
India, places like that.
Well, there was. I mean, I think early 2000s, early aughts, like Nokia was the phone.
Yeah,
everybody had one.
They were the phone, and we called on their warehouse in Centerport, and which did not have at the time, which was a big deal, triple free port.
Right.
Which meant that they were paying taxes on all of their inventory.
Yep.
And cell phones. That building over there in Centerport had $60 million. Of phones, inventory, and so we, I'm joking a little bit here, but we said if there was a way that you could get a better building and save, $1.8 million a year, wouldn't you want to hear about it?
Right.
And we made that argument to the Nokia people, and they did want to hear about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was more than almost twice as much than their rent.
Yeah.
That they could save. So
sure.
From that cold call. We did all this work with Nokia in the Western Hemisphere. We did their factory at Fort Worth with Perot, Ross Perot Jr.
Yeah.
We did their U.S. headquarters in Las Colinas, which was 1 million square feet of office space. And we did, we did Canada, all over the United States, South America, Mexico. So that was one of the career highlights.
Yeah.
For me. And then we were also, at the same time, our team was still doing capital markets investment sales.
Yeah. Well, you still do some one-off and tenant rep stuff here.
Just those are just legacy relationships.
Sure, I know. But it's great that you still, you're still active and servicing those old clients. Let's talk about the market today. I think a couple weeks ago you were up in New York, and you were at the Blackstone conference, correct?
Yeah.
And I mean, tell us a little bit about what you feel like the pulse of the investment sales capital markets world is today. Where I think
it's really good, but it depends on the asset class.
Sure.
So COVID structurally changed the office sector.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. And so it'll take a while for that to ever recover.
Ever come back. Yep.
Some of those buildings might not recover. They may have to be readapted to a different use.
For sure.
At the same time, COVID helped the industrial and logistics sector.
Yep.
Because of e-commerce.
Yep.
And so people shut up in their homes and couldn't go to the mall.
Yep.
They bought everything online.
Yep.
So that fast forwarded the industrial sector fundamentals by about 10 years.
Yeah.
So now it's the most popular asset class in the world.
Yep.
Apartments are right up there too, but it's such an easy story to understand with industrial e-commerce.
Yep.
And for most of my career, I mentioned those buildings we sold over here in Metropolitan Park. I forgot what that was. Let's say it was a $20 million deal.
Yeah.
You could never attract global capital with a $20 million deal. Yeah. But industrial started to get opportunities of scale.
Yeah.
So you mentioned what were the big portfolios. Well, when you do a $5 billion deal or billion dollar deal or $500 million deal, those are big enough numbers to attract global capital from around the world.
Yeah.
So that part of the market is strong.
Yeah.
For opportunities of scale
There's a lot of appetite for foreign capital to come to the U.S.
Yes, I mean, domestic capital hasn't gone away either.
Right.
And our asset class in particular, industrial real estate, matches up well from an actuarial perspective to pension funds.
Yep.
So some pension fund can plan out. They know out in the future how many retiring employees they're going to have 10 years from now. So they try to match up income to pay those pension plans.
Yeah.
And, you could put your money in the stock market, and I think it's supposed to go up on average 10% over time. It's actually gone up 10% a year.
Yeah.
But it might not go up 10% every year.
Right.
And if you're from an actuarial perspective, when you need the income to pay retirees, so you need something steady and reliable and predictable, which is real estate in general, specifically industrial.
Yep.
Because it doesn't cost a lot. Office buildings, they cost a lot to re-tenant the building,
build
build them,
operating, all those things.
And industrial, when the tenant moves out, it doesn't take that much money usually to re-let it at a small TI cost.
It blows me away how different the office and industrial world is, right? Because when you're representing industrial users, I would say 95% of them, all they care about is the functionality of the warehouse.
Yes.
How it lays out, what's the loading, is there power there? And then office is such a afterthought,
Yes.
And but then you get in the office world, and my God, you got to have the offices this size, and we got to have these type of doors and lighting and all these things. And so, it's such a different world.
I mean, in your building here, there was nice music playing in the background, and there was little couches and places to sit down as a tenant amenity.
Right.
And you maybe do not need to have as much of that in a warehouse. You look at the functionality.
Functionality. That's what it's all about. Do you where do you feel like we are in the economic cycle? I mean, do you think we're going to have some rate cuts this year? And if we do, is that going to kick back up capital markets again? Are we all sitting on pause, kind of waiting for the election to play out? I mean, where do you kind of see where we are in the cycle right now, Jack?
I mean, I hear people talk about the election, and I don't know that it's really putting a lot of people on pause, because it's really hard to distinguish between the two political parties.
Yeah.
For years and years, Republicans were always the one that watched the budget and cut costs wherever you can.
Yeah.
Well, they don't do that anymore.
Right.
And Democrats are, there's no real, there's all these, the two candidates are different people.
Sure.
We could all talk about if we have the best candidates out there or not.
We need to get Jack Fraker in the White House.
But I don't know that there's some sort of pause, but I hear people bring it up. But I don't think it's slowing anybody down. The election part of it.
Yeah.
The overall economy, we're spending so much money. Our budget is, we take in a $2.5 trillion a year in income in the United States, but we spend $3.5 trillion.
Yeah.
So we have this unbelievable deficit, and it's hard to imagine that would ever, how to ever get that under control or get back. Nobody has a political confidence to lower costs, for Social Security or things like that. If you told some 25-year-old person today, hey, you're not going to be able to get Social Security until you're 75. Right now, you can get it, even if you're 25 today, you can get it when you're 62. Yeah, they're all going to live so much longer, but nobody will change that. Yeah. So nobody has the confidence or power or strength to change spending. Yeah. So I'm worried about that all the time. Yeah. Our economy. I mean,
what do you hear about debt maturity and banks and?
Yeah, there's whatever it is, 1.3 or 1.4 trillion of maturing bank loans for real estate.
Yeah. Now a lot of the distress is in that office sector, but that's still going to affect some of these banks, right? Don't you think there's going to be some regional bank failures ahead?
I mean, technically there should be some failures now.
Yes.
It's politically uncomfortable to do that, so they're going to try to push it into next year, kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
So that's a real problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been through it before with the RTC crisis, but this is much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It could cause consolidation. Some of the banks will consolidate.
I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see some of the big guys pick up some of the littler guys, and it's going to be kind of more of a big bank world, probably.
Yes. And they take reserves. Every one of these regional banks and the big banks or money center banks are taking reserves to get ready for the reckoning that's coming.
Yeah.
So those reserves, if somebody really studied that, they're all doing reserves so that they can possibly survive it.
Do you got a most memorable deal to date that you just were like, man, whether it be like saving a deal that got retraded big time or something that just sticks out in your mind?
Well, the biggest deal I mentioned was that Nokia deal. That was so great for so many reasons. And then another big deal that sticks out in my mind is we sold some buildings in Tokyo Harbor.
Wow.
And I think
was that for Prologis or who?
No,
was
it was the owner was Fortress.
Okay.
And CBRE managed the building.
Okay.
In Tokyo Harbor, and they were the incumbent to win get the sales assignment. And then the head of Fortress called up the head of our capital markets in the U.S. and says, "Hey, your team in Tokyo made a pitch to sell this building, but they're not going to get it. They're going to come in. We're going to go with somebody else." But he told our capital markets guy, "We'll give you guys one more chance, but you got to get somebody over here tomorrow or the next day."
Yeah.
And I was in, I think it was tomorrow is what they wanted. So I was in Scottsdale, our company's function, annual capital markets function, and they asked me to go over to Tokyo.
Yeah.
And the clue we got from Fortress is the Japanese CBRE people only talked about Japanese investors. And so the Fortress wanted to hear somebody with a global perspective. So I went over there. And I'm kind of proud of this deal. And I went over there and I brought logos and names of all the biggest investors in the world.
Yep.
And that's all I talked about. And drop names of all these groups.
Yep.
And then we got the assignment, and Fortress was headquartered in New York, and then we ended up selling it to LaSalle, headquartered in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
So for all that exotic of global names, two Americans
still American,
were involved in it. But I was proud of that deal.
What did those buildings trade for back in the day? Do you remember, Jay?
It would have been.
It had to have been a record, right? One of the highest.
Well, the prices are just so much higher over there.
Well, sure. Land cost.
I'm sure it was something like $1,500, $2,000 square foot. Yeah.
Wow.
These buildings were those multi-level you've seen. They were
3 or 4 stories tall.
Three buildings, but they were each 1 million square feet, and they were each 10 levels.
10 levels.
Yes. And the buildings in Japan and maybe other parts of the world, the tractor trailers are smaller.
Right.
So they could drive up there easier.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to have a high building like that in the United States because our equipment, trucks and trailers are so long.
Right.
So we did that one. That was one I really liked.
Yeah, that's a great story.
And I've been involved in selling buildings in Europe and certainly Mexico.
Yeah.
That's a big thing happening.
Sure.
Nearshoring is really happening.
It's real.
Yep.
It's real. I heard today at lunch, some other Dallas groups got 900 acres under contract down along the border, in Laredo.
Yes.
And I mean, it's happening. And it's mind blowing that Laredo now is the largest port of entry of all goods in the United States.
Bigger than Long Beach, bigger than Chicago.
Right.
Bigger than New Jersey.
And with, Mexico kind of turning into the new China, I mean, us sitting here in Dallas and Texas on their front doorstep, I mean, I think we're going to be a huge beneficiary of all that.
I don't want to do a commercial advertisement for Mexico, but they have a really young population.
Yep.
Their population's younger than China.
Yep.
Their labor rate is lower than China.
Yep. And you don't have to sit on a boat for 3 weeks.
Yes, but they only have 800 million square feet of industrial in Mexico.
In all of Mexico, yeah, which is smaller than DFW.
Yeah, smaller than it is here, and they have 130 million people.
Interesting.
And they're growing.
So that number is going to increase.
They have a population growth. China's got negative population. Right. Korea is 0.65.
The one child rule really wasn't smart. What China did a few decades ago. Yeah, that's hurting them big time. Yeah, and then the cost of labor has gone up so much because they don't have population.
No, and everybody's getting older.
That's right. Tell me about your best broker trip you've ever been on, Jack.
Let's see.
I know there's got to be some good ones in there.
I used to do, I went one time with a great company that took us all to Aspen.
Okay.
And we all, each broker had its own personal trainer or teach you how to ski.
Okay.
And I think they were all Olympic.
Yeah.
Skiers. It must have been the year that the Olympics were not happening, the Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
And I had somebody from Norway, this woman from Norway's Olympic ski team.
Yeah.
And apparently I've been skiing completely the wrong way my whole life.
Interesting.
And she taught me some things that helped me get better. I liked that trip. And then stayed in really nice accommodations.
Yeah.
I went one time with on I guess a fishing trip in Belize.
Oh, yeah.
Belize. That was fun.
Was that with the Duke guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It was great. And then,
Jeff Thornton loves Belize. He does.
The trips like that. I mean, I don't do as many of those anymore.
Yeah. You just fly all around the world. And
I mean, I'm not going to say been there, done that, but I like to, be polite and go to some of them.
Sure. Yeah. You've also experienced some cool stuff. You were at the Super Bowl this year.
Yes.
You've played at Augusta. Not bad.
That's I should say that one. That was the best.
I mean, yeah, that's an amazing.
Can I just talk about it real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
So we did a big deal. Josh McCarter and I did a big deal at CBRE and sold $250 million portfolio primarily. I think it was all in South Carolina.
Okay.
And it was nowadays South Carolina is a popular market for manufacturing.
Yep.
But it was always considered sort of a secondary market. And we sold that in July of 2007.
Yeah.
1 minute before. Oof. We're out of time?
No.
1 minute before the great financial crisis started. Yeah. Or maybe it's 1 minute after it started. We didn't even realize it. But $250 million deal. And one of the great Americans that I've ever met, George Johnson, was the owner and the developer.
Yeah.
And so after we did the deal, that would have been July. He called me a month later and said, a couple months later, said, do you like to play golf, Jack? I said, yeah, I like to play, but I'm not very good. Well, would you like to play at Augusta? I said, yes. And so he said, well, I've got a couple other guys. We'll put together a foursome.
Yeah.
If you can get here on Sunday afternoon, we'll play 18 holes that day. We'll play 18 holes on Monday, and then we'll play 18 holes on a Tuesday. So 72 holes.
Yeah.
In 2 or 3 days.
Even if you're not a great golfer, you're taking that trip.
Gosh. We stayed in one of those cabins.
Yeah.
And we ate down there at the
Butler cabin,
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, incredible.
That was great. And
now, do you have to walk that course?
Yeah, you walk the course, and I could tell you 100 different stories about it. But
I know there was a very famous guy in the clubhouse while you were there too.
Warren Buffett was there.
Yeah,
and then right next to him was a famous at the time of.
Did Warren come up and ask for your autograph?
No.
Okay.
And then Frank Broyles, famous Arkansas guy,
head coach. Yeah.
Who knows who else was in there?
Right. What an unbelievable place.
And you have to be in our cabin that first afternoon in our cabin. One of the guys with us was going to make a cell phone call. He knew not to go out on the golf course or do it in the country club building, but he went out on the patio of our cabin.
Yeah.
And our host, George Johnson, said, you need to come in, make that phone call inside.
Wow.
And this didn't happen with that trip, but later on, a couple of weeks later, Mr. Johnson was playing there with somebody who got a Coke in the club, in the 19th hole, and took his Coke, drinking his Coke, walking down the fairway, and he knew not to throw his empty cup down.
Sure.
But he finished his Coke and then threw the ice, just poured the ice out on the fairway.
And got in trouble for that.
And Mr. Johnson said, you might want to go back and pick that ice back. Those kind of stories, and I could tell you some more.
Oh my gosh.
That place is great.
I read this morning, Jack, somewhere that Augusta is thinking about opening up 1 week a year to the public to play. But guess what? The cost of admission is $100,000 a round.
Really? You know what?
They probably can get it.
They'll get it.
Yeah.
And it's a lifetime experience. Yeah. I should have brought that up earlier. That was great.
Jack, what advice would you give to young kids in the business today?
Well, I'd say you have to read what's going on in the industry.
Okay.
You can't
be a student.
Be a student of it. You can't sit there and read every article that comes out because you'll spend all day doing it. But certainly do a quick scan of it so you can be conversational. Or if it's really something you want to read it on the weekend. I would say to young people, go into work on Saturday mornings.
Yep.
You need to have a balanced life with your family, and
sure.
But you can go in at the family's usually sleeping at 6 a.m. Saturday mornings.
Right.
So we would go in. I would do that 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings, and be home in time to coach Little League baseball or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'd say you have to have a good work ethic.
Yep. Put in the hours.
I don't know, but just be and maybe just fine tune your craft.
Yep.
Have people you can model yourself after.
Sure.
I think the days of a lone wolf are kind of gone.
Sure.
So it's usually good to team up with somebody else.
Yep.
Don't be hung up on the commissions. If you're in the brokerage side of the business, don't be hung up on the commissions.
Yeah.
How much do I get out of that?
No.
I mean, always do the best for the client.
Yeah.
And I think that should go without saying, but don't take any shortcuts to serve yourself.
Yeah, I don't feel like you should ever chase the money.
Yeah.
In general, right? You chase the opportunity, chase the relationship with the client, right? And the money will come.
Yes.
And
try to just, have a good reputation.
You have a pretty decent one.
I try to. And then there's some other people in our business.
He's the nicest guy in real estate, folks.
No, there's another one, Herb Weitzman's famous.
Yeah.
I was talking about him just a little while ago. He returned every phone call. Yep. Maybe back for most of his career, they didn't have emails.
Right.
But he would return every phone call, even if it meant, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't get back to you earlier today. I hope I'm not waking you up. I don't know what he said, but he would always be responsive.
Tell your funny, would you mind telling that funny story? I think it was Seafried in Europe where you were looking at the site and it was frozen over.
Oh,
would you tell that funny story?
It wasn't frozen. And I think I can mention this name because we still laugh about it, but it was Carl Panettone.
Panettone, my bad.
Yes. So he, you got to hand it to Carl Panettone. So already by that time in Europe, Prologis and AMB dominated the industrial market
right
in Europe. And Carl Panettone was doing great in the United States.
Yep.
But he wanted to, go expand into Europe.
Yep.
So he won 2 big RFPs. One was H&M department stores for 1 million square foot warehouse in Poland.
Yep.
And the other one was Coty, Coty perfume.
Okay.
And that was in the Czech Republic. So he beat out the big boys and got the business, but then he needed to capitalize it.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know what his net worth was at the time and but he wanted to capitalize it and asked me to go help him put together
the capital stack.
Capital stack. So we went, he'd bought this one great site, and I think it was Poland. It was at the intersection of the 2 biggest freeways in Poland.
Okay.
He bought it in, let's say, October of the previous year.
Right.
And it was covered by 4 feet of snow.
Right.
But from an aerial, and
looked pretty good.
Looked great. So, but this is the first time he physically walked it.
Yeah.
And the all that snow had melted. This was probably in April, and there was a creek that diagonally crossed the site. A deep creek. And that was the first time he'd seen it live. And we got up there, and these guys. It was in Poland because these guys commissioned borrowed Polish army waders. Big rubber waders that went all the way up here so that we could walk across this creek.
That's great.
And the development guy for Panettone in Poland said, don't worry about this. I mean, we'll just reroute this.
We'll reroute this
creek.
Yeah.
Which they did.
Right.
But that was a funny moment, a career moment to go with Carl and another guy, Dudley Mitchell. Yeah. And they wanted to expand in Europe. And we flew all over Europe for that week.
Wow.
In a private jet.
Yeah.
And just landed. I guess we showed our passports at the end of the trip someplace, but some of those countries just land in a FBO.
Right.
Someplace. And the town would always be there to welcome him.
Yeah.
These are small little towns for development. But we would be dead tired, traveling, but he could pull it off.
Well, he better be glad it was in Poland and not California, because I bet he couldn't have rerouted that creek in California.
That'd be 20 years.
Yes, it would.
Versus 2 hours. Right.
Some quick hitters that I'm going to throw at you that we're going to close with, so that people can get to know you and hopefully take a few things back to them from this podcast. Well, do you got a favorite book that you've ever read, or a couple that you lean on of like, man, that was...
I like to read history, and did I mention Saudi Arabia earlier?
No, we didn't talk about.
So I worked in Saudi Arabia,
right?
And there's no TV or anything back then, and we would just read books like crazy. Yeah. And I always like history books, biographies or history books. So
how did you even source books?
They had them.
Just stacks there for you guys.
Yeah, they had. I guess that's how we got them. There was books available.
Yeah,
but I've always liked history. I've read this really good book, which is the 3 volumes of the biography of Winston Churchill.
Yep,
I think that's one of the best books.
Yeah,
there's a book that's a really quick, easy read, which is A World Lit Only by Fire, and it covers the early. Covers the last days of the Roman Empire, I guess, from the 300 AD to beginning of Renaissance.
Yeah.
And so it's got great history. And I've actually handed that book out to people, buy it for them, and A World Lit Only by Fire.
We'll have that linked in the show notes so everybody can look it up.
It's great. And another one is it's about the Second Crusades.
Okay.
There was now I can't. Saladin was the head of the Islam in the Middle East, and Richard the Lionhearted was the head of the Christians nation in Europe.
Yeah,
they came back to take back the Holy Land.
Yeah,
so that's a good one because it's so relevant today.
Still going on.
Still going on.
I love history too. I'm gonna have to dig into those.
I'll get them for you. Okay.
I know they'll show up next week on my doorstep. What if we were to jump in your car today and turn on the radio? What station do you got going on, or what's Jack listening to on the radio? And I know how chaotic your life is. I mean, you're usually on the phone all the time. So there's but in the background or maybe on the weekends, what are you listening to?
It's so sad. I listen in the morning to the Squawk Box.
Okay.
With those, a little bit of views on the financial world.
Sure.
And then I hate to say, almost embarrassed to say it, but I have the Fox News channel on because they have two channels. One's all about, commentary, but the other one's quick headlines.
Headlines, sure.
So I like the headlines of what's going on.
Yeah.
I do have Sirius XM also has every different music genre.
All right. So on Sirius, what are those stations?
I like the list. There's I like the Beatles channel.
Okay.
It's still relevant today. The couple of channels. There was a Tom Petty channel for a while. There's the Eagles channel.
Yeah.
So those are all old and dating me.
Yeah. Do you got a favorite Eagles song? I mean, is it Hotel California or you got another one?
I like some of the Don Henley's that he did by himself.
Yeah.
Sunset Grill and those kind of songs.
Yeah. He's an interesting character.
Yes. You can see him around Dallas.
Yeah, he's still around. He's actually probably about half a mile from where I live.
Yeah.
You can't even see his house from the road. He's got so much shrubs. Hopefully they're still there after that crazy storm we had this week. So we talked about Winston Churchill. If you could have coffee with any historical famous figure other than Winston Churchill,
it would be
who'd you go with?
Other than
so you
Winston,
you got to pick somebody else.
He would be there. George Washington.
Yeah,
either Washington or Hamilton.
Okay,
one of those kind of guys. If Jesus was at the table,
Jesus would be good.
We would all just be listening.
Yes, we would.
But historical figures like from the American
revolutionary time frame,
those kind of guys.
Yeah. If you could live anywhere else in the world besides the great Dallas, Texas, where would it be?
I think I'd like Paris or London,
really?
Or maybe although it's so far away, Melbourne, Australia.
Really?
Yeah.
You like Australia?
Yeah, I do. That's good.
How many times have you been over there?
Twice.
Yeah. That's a long flight, isn't it?
It is. But it's voted every other year, if not every year. Melbourne, Australia is the best city in the world.
Wow. I did not know that.
Maybe Hawaii.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Not New York, probably.
No. I don't really get the fascination of New York. Like to me, after about 48 hours, I'm kind of ready to get out.
I was in Boston and New York earlier this week, and Boston's clean and and New York can be clean and good, but it's just so chaotic.
So chaotic. Just
Tokyo's a great place, but it's so culturally different. But I like Tokyo.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I don't love about the Northeast is just the culture's so different. Like people are just not happy there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
they like to bust your chops, as they put it.
Right. Whereas if you accidentally bumped into somebody here in Dallas, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did that." No. They would look at you and say something different. What's your favorite thing about Dallas, Texas? You got a favorite restaurant or a favorite place?
I mean, I feel like I go to Mexican food all the time.
Yeah.
And so I like Mexican food restaurants.
Do you have a favorite? Like if you can only go to one Mexican?
Well, right now it's currently Doce Mesas.
Where is that?
It's in Knox Henderson area.
Doce's Mesas?
Doce, D-O-C-E.
Mesas.
Mesa or Mesas.
Okay, so 20 tables is basically what that means.
Gosh, I didn't even put that together.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Or 12 tables.
I think it's about 20.
Or maybe it's 20. Yeah.
No, that would be 20.
That's right.
Yeah. So
once, doce,
yeah.
Trece. Yeah.
But anyway, it's great. That's
12 tables. 12 tables.
I mean, Javier's, but that's not it's lost a little bit. I like it still, but it's not as good as
I was there last Saturday. It's always good. Just the vibe in there is so amazing.
Yes.
Hope that place never disappears. You're big into giving back and charities, and I always like to close with that. I mean, tell us a little bit about some of the ones you're passionate about.
Well, the one I'm most passionate about is named Cristo Rey.
Yeah.
And it's a college prep school in Pleasant Grove.
Yep.
Which is, probably leads this greater Dallas area in crime statistics.
Yep.
but the families that are down there want to make a future for their children.
Yep.
And they have this college prep
school,
and there's about 115 kids in each grade.
Yeah.
So let's say whatever that is, 450 students.
Yep.
And that's my favorite one, and I'm involved in that.
And I've been fortunate to go down there with you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's incredible what that place is doing, and just the opportunities that these kids are getting. They're going to SMU and Harvard, and they
get 100% graduation. Every senior graduates.
That's right.
From high
they
school.
all graduate,
and then 98% of them go to college.
Yeah,
and then all those kids graduate from college.
Yeah,
it's a great.
And they're
great.
Usually first generation college graduates on all of them, and yeah, it's amazing the work that you're doing there, and others here in Dallas to grow that place, and that's really cool. Where can, if you want to reach Jack Fraker, where can listeners find you, Jack? Are you active on LinkedIn or anything like that?
I have LinkedIn.
You do have LinkedIn, yeah. So
we have a media marketing person at Newmark, and they said you need to be more active on LinkedIn.
Well, you are the Godfather. I mean, people want to hear from the Godfather.
You are. They want to hear from you.
I don't know about that.
You're. I don't know. You have 900,000 followers. What is it? I saw something.
It's not that many.
You have a lot of followers.
I do. No, and I've talked about it, and it's been unbelievable. It's I actually talked about it at lunch today. Some guy was just telling me, like, he randomly will talk to people that aren't even in real estate, but they know that he's in real estate, and they'll say, "Hey man, do you know this guy, Conrad?" And I'm like, really? And he's like, "Yeah, for real. Like people ask me because you post good, engaging content,
yes.
and it's honestly changed my life. It's wild, and that's why I'm sitting here on this microphone right now talking to you, is because it's kind of how this world is communicating now and sharing information, And
yes,
and,
I think it's great. I'm glad that we're friends now. We knew each other for a long time.
We've known each other for a long time, and we obviously became good buds 2-3 years ago, and now we hang out quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Conrad.
I appreciate you coming on the show today, bud.
Thank you. It's great.
Thank you so much.